Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Lightning Assault Noosphere podcast. My name is Nathan Leahy, aka The Mazer, and with me today I have James, aka The Mad Magos.
Howdy doody.
And we've got Dan, aka Little Willy.
I'm an old man.
Speaking of old men, today we are talking about why indeed, Dan, you should play the Necrons.
Tell me why I should.
They feel like one of those factions that everybody owns at this point. Weirdly,
I don't.
except you. That's the thing. It's like everybody owns like a Space Marine chapter, because it's just sort of like one of those things you branch out into in sort of the modern day hobby as it is at the moment. And with the whole Imperium magazine and Indomitus and like the starter sets, it seems like everybody and their dog seems to have a couple of Necrons lying around. I know me and James do. And
Conquest?
What's that, sorry? Oh, yeah, no, Conquest didn't have
Conquest
Necrons.
before Imperium? It did?
Conquest had Necrons?
Didn't it?
No, it was Death Guard.
Yeah, Conquest
Oh, sorry, it was
Yeah,
Death
yeah.
God. My part.
No.
Yes, sorry.
Don't you
Oh, you're right.
dare.
Imperium. Yeah, no, you're right. Imperium and then the new box sets. That's right, the starter box set.
Yeah. So it feels like a lot of people have branched out into Necrons, and they were one of the first, apart from Space Marines, to get the first 9th edition Codex, which was great for Necron players because they were running on some pretty old rules that were a bit booky here and there. Some aging models, not as aging as others, but it was a bit of a struggle. And when it came out, it was cool. It was decent. They got a lot of shiny models that are genuinely fantastic looking. But now we're quite a way through 9th edition, and the Codex is showing its age. And with all the new 9th edition Codex coming out, there's sort of a lot of ideas that have been taken from that Necron Codex and run with for some of the newer codexes. So I guess they're kind of like a precursor to a lot of armies. Admech are very similar to the Necrons, but a bit more fleshed out. So they're a cool faction, first to get their codex, but it's sort of getting on a bit, and they could probably use a little bit of an update. But it seems like a lot of people have them, and some people in the competitive scene are having some decent success. And there's quite a variety of models and sort of builds that you can run and still sort of do all right in your local game store. Before we move on to things, what are people's general feelings about Necrons as they stand at the moment, James?
Overall general feelings. I am looking forward to actually getting a Necrons army up and running. So what I mean by that is I bought a couple of the starter box sets when they very first came out. The premium one, the top one that came with all the scenery and everything. And then I bought one of the next one down, primarily for the Space Marines, in all honesty, because obviously being a big Blood Angels fan. But I've slowly and without intention and through the Imperium magazine now acquired quite a lot of Necrons, and I've got a decent size army sitting here. And I did promise to the missus that I was going to do a Necron army for her, and she wanted it. I let her pick the color theme, and it was going to be black and pink.
Yeah.
Which actually I think is going to look really cool once I get it up.
I can stand my pink, 100%.
Yeah, of course you can. So watch this space for that. As a faction, I think they've got some really cool lore. I mean, they came about, I want to say 3rd edition. If anyone can disagree with me there.
I have no idea.
I think it was 3rd edition, possibly either 3rd or 4th edition that came out. And yeah, this, like I said, there's some really interesting characters in there amongst it all, and some really nice background and fluff, which is what obviously I'm all about.
Yeah, Dan, do you have any feelings aside from our one game of frustration?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Like that was just a game. I've played against them before. I've played them a few times in 8th edition. And oddly enough, I think it was in 6th or 7th edition. Like I had some models because I was planning to play some Warhammer, but no one was playing at the time. So I had a few Necron models. I've always liked the aesthetic of the Necrons. Big, spooky skeleton Terminator-looking dudes. Obviously, with the heavy Egyptian influences, and I think they're leaning a lot more on the Egyptian theme now. So aesthetically, they're great. I'm a huge fan, and purely on the aesthetics and the lore, I was tempted a few times to get into Necrons. I think personally, their playstyle might not be what I'm looking for. I think it used to be.
Yeah.
But I think after I started playing sort of Drakari and Harlequins, and Custodies to some extent, I think I personally I prefer a really fast sort of army. But I am open. I am open to persuasion.
They used to. It's weird. They changed the army sort of. What would you call it? The style of the army from 8th to 9th. They used to be a sort of mid-range in terms of durability faction, and quite killy. They used to be quite shooty. And then in the 9th edition, they turned them into a less killy army that was more about being a nuisance, I feel. Like, I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to be a nuisance for a turn. And then I'm going to teleport over here and I'm going to be a nuisance for a turn. And, oh, what's that? You shot me. Sometimes you don't shoot me. Yeah, the playstyle's definitely changed. So if you're interested in blazing speed and all-out killing power, then by all means play 8th edition with the what was it, the
Doomsday Arc,
triple Doomsday Arc, triple Doomsday Scythe, and
the Death Croissants.
Yeah, so that was a thing.
In fairness, though, I think they are quite a kind of sitting this not to the extent of, but in the same position as Space Marines, as in they've got quite a fleshed out set of units now.
Yeah,
you've got options. So whilst competitively speaking, it might not necessarily be the most competitive list, but you can run a horde Necron list, or you can run a very fast attack orientated list. You can run a very heavy support orientated list.
Yeah, I think,
again, they've got for play styles overall. Not, and again, I'm stressing this, not in a competitive setting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think
you can play them overall.
Yeah, I think it's important, to note, because when we say competitive, I think we mean like the absolute upper echelons, 1% of players that go to tournaments kind of competitive.
Yeah.
Not like, because keep in mind that these competitive players, what makes them good is not just their army list, right? That's just the tool. It's more about play style and understanding it. If you're playing at your local game store, or friends, I think that the idea of competitive lists kind of goes out of the book, and you're gonna do well with pretty much any faction in any army as long as you get a sort of have a decent grasp of the rules.
Yeah.
So I stand by like every army can do well.
At your local game store.
At your local game store with friends. If you go into like tournaments and want to like absolutely purely, 100% competitive, like you want to win a tournament, then that's a different matter. But we're not here for that.
I mean, even so, we try and stress that within the channel. Sometimes we'll run really competitive lists, like the Custodies list that I played last week. Like Nathan said, that was a tournament winning list. And other times we'll just run more fluffy lists. Do you know what I mean? Just to give you an example of what you can or can't do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a nice balance. But like I say, the point I was really trying to stress is it's not like, for example, like the Aldari, where generally speaking, you run a very fast list and they're always fast, they're always on the move, that kind of thing. You can tailor a Necron list more to your play style against some of the other armies.
Yeah, I mean, every army can you can kind of change the play style a bit. I think every army's got options for different things. But in general, sort of every army has has some kind of theme to it, if you wish.
Yeah.
And Necrons are definitely the slow and purposeful kind of army where they're very tanky. They go slow, but hard to take down.
Yeah.
In the same vein as something like Death Guard or Custodians.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird. I've had 2 games now where I've lost horribly, but had an absolute blast while doing so. And obviously, the last one was the White Scars match, which was absolutely hilarious, and that was like my most enjoyed game. But I did actually enjoy playing Silvertide, just mass warrior Necrons. Even though I got tabled basically by turn 4. I did kind of it tickled me. It tickled that part of me that was like, I'm gonna put these models here and I'm going to be a real annoyance in my opponent's ass, and watch them get frustrated. But I can understand, as a person going against Necrons, the frustration of shooting a huge blob of warriors through an entire turn and it not disappearing. But at the same time, that's kind of how the army has to function, otherwise it wouldn't function. But there are quite a few different ways to play the army, indicated in some of the list that we'll bring towards the end of the podcast. But anyway, jumping into the lore bits, James, could you give us a bit of an early overview of Necrons?
Okay, so I'm going to start with a little quote from the Eyes of the Imperium. From an Inquisitor Kessel at the Conclave of Eladon. We are less than cattle to these beings, chattel to be cast aside, consumed or made of sport with for their pleasure. There is not one amongst us that they would pay heed to a world of man as I would pay an ant on my boot. So yeah, that kind of gives you an overarching view. The Necrons are an
Trazen.
ancient race. Except Trazen.
He pays heed to too much. Too many things.
Yeah. We'll get to him.
Yeah.
So the Necrons are an ancient beyond reckoning. Basically, they fought a war with the Old Ones. For those who don't know who the Old Ones are, the race that actually created the likes of the Aldari, the Orcs, the Slan, and the Jukero. And some even say they dabbled in the affairs of mankind itself. Though those people might be deemed as heretics, we kind of take the overall step back view. And like I say, so the Necrons fought the Old Ones in what was known as the War of Heaven. And apparently the likes of the Aldari and the Orcs were specifically created to combat the Necrons, or the Necron tier as they were known back then. 60 million, fast forward 60 million years later, the Necrons, as some of you may or may not know, are basically awakening from what they call Tomb Worlds. Tomb Worlds are planets throughout the entire galaxy that the Necrons once inhabited. And through one reason or another, they went to sleep, shall we say, at this stage.
Well, they went to bed because they got tired of fighting with the Eldar. They got to a weird stalemate where neither of them were winning. After destroying the Old Ones, they were just fighting the Eldar.
And they weren't always robots either.
No,
they weren't. I'll back on them, but I'll get to that. So basically, fast forward 60 million years, they're starting to awaken from the Tomb Worlds as the galaxy is ripe for reconquest. The disappearance of the Old Ones obviously had a big impact on that. So I suppose let's go into the War of Heaven. So basically, you have the Old Ones, the creators, as I said, and you've got the Necrons. The Necrons were advanced beyond years. However, they still didn't hold the key to immortality, and they approached the Old Ones and asked them for it. And the Old Ones basically went, no. So they spat their dummy, and they went to war with them. basically they got the asses kicked by the old ones. And long story short, by chance or by hook or by crook, they came across the Katan. Now, the Katan themselves were the Eaters of Stars. They were born at the beginning of the galaxy with the rest of the galaxy, and they were also old adversaries of the old ones. So the Silent King, the last Silent King, actually struck a deal with the Katan, and the Katan, known as the Deceiver, promised them everything that they wanted, not only immortality in itself, but they also promised them the power to destroy the old ones. And so the war in heaven began and was fought, and like you say, fought to almost a stalemate. But to be fair, when we say stalemate, the Necrons actually they did win with the help of the Katan, but the Silent King realized that within the Katan giving them the power, they also actually enslaved the Necron tier, and that's how they became the Necrons, because they put their souls effectively into living metal. But with that came the expense of what emotion and personal thought. Only the strongest willed of the Necrons actually began that, which is kind of how you get the Necron lords. The majority of the populace, became enslaved, pretty much mindless automaton. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, there's a little excerpt here. It was only when the Silent King himself emerged from the biotransference process and looked upon what had become of his people that he saw the awful truth and the pact that he had made. As Sarazek watched the Katan feast upon the life essence, of his people, he realized the terrible depth of his mistake. So, following this and following the war in heaven fate, he deceives the Katan gods. The Necron rose up. They defeated these ancient beings of power that had allowed them to win the war in heaven against the Slan. The Slan disappeared. But following the defeat of the Katan themselves, by this point, the galaxy's, I suppose, sentient humans, Eldari, Orcs, Jakaro, Slyth, those kind of races had kind of taken over the entire galaxy. So basically, the Silent King put himself into a self-imposed exile, disabled the command protocols that give him the power over all of these mindless Necrons, and disappeared out of the known galaxy into the void. Basically told them all to go to sleep. And like you say, we jump forward 60,000 years. The Imperium Man has come to fruition. The Eldar have, had their turn and their time, and then birthed Slanesh and everything. And the Silent King, the only reason he's actually returned, apparently, is because he discovered the Tyranids before the Tyranids came into the galaxy. And he's come back because his fear is if he doesn't do something about the Nids, then there won't be any empire for him to conquest because everything will be scoured of life. And essentially, the Necrons, their ultimate goal is to go back from living metal back into living human sentient beings with souls again. And so he's spent the last millennia or so in the background waiting for these various tomb worlds to come back to life, and has struck deals with the overlords and everything, and is trying to keep primarily the Imperium and also and everybody else from basically cocking up and giving the Tyranids far too much biomass. He wants the Tyranids to be defeated so then the Necrons can take over the galaxy and take command of all of the lesser races as they see them.
And when the Silent King returned, not everyone was too okay with it. What's his name?
No.
Imitek. I believe Imitek the Stormlord turned around and told him, "You're a fucking disgrace. Fuck off. We're not serving you. Go to hell, you piece of shit."
Exactly.
In a very long diatribe.
Yes. So much like the Imperium, the Necron race now has internal strife as well as external strife.
I mean, I think law-wise, they've always had internal strife due to their really short lives before the biotransference happened, and
yes,
that's why they went.
You are correct, Dan.
That's why the Silent King went on to sort of fight with the Old Ones and Eldar and everything else. Is because that was sort of a unified purpose for the Necrons to stop the infighting and give them something that they can all work towards.
And they then smashed the Catan to pieces and enslaved them.
Yeah, they didn't just smash them; they straight up enslaved them and used them as weapons.
Yeah, all of them except for they're all they control shards of the
they split them into shards.
But there's a couple of rogue shards still wandering about. Like the Void Dragon is under Mars, where the Adeptus Mechanicus live. The Deceiver is obviously still fucking with people, even though they do have a few shards of the Deceiver knocking around.
And the Nightbringer.
Yeah, Nightbringer. I think
so. If we go on to those, I mean, the Void Dragon is sometimes referred to as the Dragon, though its proper name is Mag-Rorath. Is one of the few remaining Catan and one of the Necron star gods in the Milky Way galaxy. The Void Dragon, or a large Catan shard of it, is believed to, by some, be the actual machine god, whether by the cult of machines or the Adeptus Mechanicus.
Yeah.
The Deceiver, also known as Mithrin, or Mithrin the Deceiver, is the Catan or Necron star god of trickery, lies, and manipulation. He was the one that obviously tricked the Silent King into making the deal in the first place. All hilarity ensues. And the Nightbringer is the embodiment of death. He's a killer of stars and worlds, an eater of gods. The Old Ones themselves could not stand before this star-spawned creature, and yet, as shall be the fate of things, the Nightbringer was broken beneath the heel of the Necron Empire, bound and humbled in such a creation that can be leashed to our will. There is nothing we cannot accomplish. Never again will we bow to any master. Never again shall we cede command of our destiny. And that, again, is a quote from the big bad lad himself, the Silent King.
Basically, they slapped their shit.
They made a deal with the gods. It's a bit like, I suppose, in a way, they're a bit like, if you think of the Katanas, the Titans, and then the Necrons are a bit like the old gods, Zeus and everybody else.
Yeah.
The children actually bitch slap them and put them back to bed and use their power for their own.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, let's move on to the sort of tabletop side of things. So, do we want to go through units first, or should we go through the core army abilities overarching first?
That's on you, dude.
I'll do the army abilities because we'll get the complicated reanimation protocols out the way first. So there's because it's going to be it was a pain for me. So they've got two core sort of overarching abilities of the army. They've got their directives, which you can see one of the sample directives on the screen, and they've got their reanimation protocol. So the directives are very similar to the Adeptus Mechanicus. What do they call them?
Canticles.
Canticles of the Omnisphere.
So they have 6 total. and you pick 5, because obviously there's 5 rounds in a tabletop game, so there's got 6 total to choose from, and you pick 5, and you have to pick what order they will activate in based on which turn they're going to activate before the game, so you kind of have to predict which one you're going to need when. And each of them have, well, some of them have either a single part or 2 parts. So you basically pick one directive part out of each directive to be active for your army. So there's quite a lot of pre-game preparation. So you'll choose which directives will be active in which turn based on the army you've built. And to give you an idea, one of them gives you an extra inch movement, which if you're playing one of the core armies that's relentlessly expansionist that gets a pre-game move, it gives you an extra inch on your pre-game move, and it makes your Necron Warriors a little bit faster than their standard 5-inch move. So those are directives. They're similar to the AdMech, except the AdMech get to choose theirs ad hoc during the game based on what they need or what they feel they want, whereas the Necrons have to sort of pre-plan it in advance. So it's basically the AdMech ones, but a bit more tricky, a bit tricksy. Then you've got Reanimation Protocols, which is this huge paragraph, which I will completely ignore because it is as follows. Every time a unit with the Reanimation Protocols keyword is shot at or fought with, so it specifically has to occur in the shooting phase or the fighting phase, it has to be an attack, an actual attack. At the end of that attack against that unit, you can roll Reanimation Protocols only for the units that were killed as a result of that specific attack. So if you were shot 2 turns ago, the models that were destroyed 2 turns ago, you don't get to roll for those. You've got to roll for the ones that have died as a result of this attack in this phase. And you basically roll an amount of dice, which is equal to the total wounds lost from that unit. So if you've got a squad of 20 warriors, and you've got 3 died last turn, but 4 died this turn, and they've got 1 wound each, you only roll 4 dice, and they reanimate on a well, sorry, you roll dice, and for every 5+, you put that dice into a pool, and when you have enough 5+s to reanimate the equivalent amount of wounds on a model, then you can reanimate that model. So let's say you've got a huge squad of destroyers that have got, say, 3 or 4 wounds each, and 4 of them out of a squad of 5 die. That means you get to roll 20 dice or whatever it is, or 9, 12 dice, something like that. And for every 3 dice you get on a 5-up for the destroyers, then you can reanimate 1 model. So it's very wordy. But once
Can I ask a question at this point?
Yeah, crack on.
So, I get what you're saying, but this is where, obviously, so using your example, you've got 20 Necron warriors, okay? Turn 1, 10 die.
Yep.
Okay? Turn 2, 5 die.
Yep.
Yeah. You roll, in turn 2, in turn 1, you roll 10 dice, and you only get one dice works, but the model's 2 wounds a model.
Yeah.
In turn 2, where a further 5 die, just to keep things simple, you only get 1. Does that mean that 1 model, you can pool those dice so that 1 model that died in turn 1 can now come back?
No.
It's just a pool every turn.
It's not every turn, it's every time they're attacked.
Yeah, so after they get shot at by a unit. Yeah, after they get shot at by a unit, however many wounds they've taken, you roll that many dice, and then if there's enough dice to fully resurrect the guy, it comes back. Yeah. So for a Necron warrior, you only need 1 die.
For a Scarab Swarm, you need 4.
Yeah, you need 4, so on and so forth. So if, 20 shots go through, right, 20 shots go through, 20 wounds are taken in a unit of, I don't know, like 10 Scarabs, right? Yeah. Then you roll 20 dice, and for every 4 of those dice that are 5+s, a Scarab will come back.
Yeah. Right. But once it's dead, it's dead forever. Yeah.
It's dead forever, right? So the pool only lasts a phase.
No, the pool. Yeah, no. The pool only lasts for that attack. It's not turns. It's not phases. It's that attack. So each time
Right.
an enemy unit attacks you, at the end of that attack, you roll a number of dice based on the wounds lost from that attack alone, just that attack. So if a Necron warrior squad was shot, you get to roll the dice. If stuff doesn't reanimate and they're shot again, you roll the dice only for what was killed from the second attack. So you don't get to roll dice for the first attack once you've already rolled them. Once you've had a chance to reanimate something and you fail it, you don't get to chance to reanimate it ever again.
Right. The only reason I'm asking is just again for clarity. If two separate units attack one Necron unit in the shooting phase,
yeah,
does the pool dissipate after the first unit shot?
It does. Yeah.
Shot. Right. That makes sense.
Yeah, because attacks happen individually per squad, don't they?
Mm. Cool. It's just for our newer players. That's all.
It's a real ball ache. I think it could have been simpler. And it's sort of one of those. It's a core feature of the army, but it's also a core feature of why people often don't like playing against them, because it's a lot of I shot you, now you get to roll loads of dice. Oh, I shot you, now you get to roll loads of dice. Oh, I shot you, now you get to roll loads of dice, over and over and over and over and over again. And it does slow the game down a bit if your opponent is new to Necrons like I was. And you've got to, when you kill models, you've got to remove them and keep them in their own little groups so you can keep an eye on how many have died. Because you can resurrect models that died 7 turns ago or whatever with a resurrection orb from one of your HQs. They're the only guys that can resurrect models that died several turns or several attacks ago.
Fair enough.
And you don't get to reanimate if your warriors run from morale, apparently, for some reason. So morale is one of those special cases where you don't get to reanimate them. So you have to keep your models separate if they ran from morale. So that's their core rules. They also have a core rule called living metal for their headquarters and some of their vehicles, which basically means at the start of the turn, they heal themselves D3 wounds. It's most HQs and most vehicles, I believe, have that rule. It's just makes them a little bit more durable, but if they get one-shotted, then it doesn't really help them. But let's move on to the interesting stuff. Let's go to some notable HQs, and we'll start off with some of the angry old men of the Codex. We'll start off with the meme, Trazen the Infinite, also known as he's literally the General Grievous of Warhammer. This will make a fine addition to my collection, Trazen the Infinite. He literally collects everything. He collects people, squads, fucking bells and various bits and bobs. He has the galaxy's biggest library. He has a Castellan Creed, the Castellan Creed, who nearly died at the fall of Cadia, but he was like, yoink, I'm gonna take you, you're cool.
Right at the end, yeah.
Yeah. And he has a very, very, very long feud with another old man called Oricon the Diviner. He's just an interesting little character that you can add to your army. I don't believe he's locked to a certain dynasty. His model is very him and Oricon's models are not necessarily imposing models. They're very much like, these guys are millennia old, they're old and decrepit, and we're going to make them look that way, but they'll just kind of, similar to in the lore, where they fuck with people for thousands of years, they do the same thing on the table. They just relentlessly fuck with people. And in Trazen's case, he steals them and puts them in stasis.
Yep. I love Trazen.
He is the shit poster of the Necrons. He's like the internet troll. He just fucking zippity-doo-dahs about space and time.
If it wasn't for him, I don't think. If it wasn't for him, Abaddon would have been a hell of a lot more successful.
Oh yeah,
shall we say?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Yeah. He was like, "Oh, what's that? This enormous crusade's trying to kill a planet. Nah, fuck it. Here's some scarabs. I'm a create a shield over this entire planet and just sort of foil these plans." When a single decrepit old robotic man has the power to prevent an entire Black Crusade, just on a whim because he fancies collecting a guy,
Yep.
Yeah, it kind of gives you the
Pretty much.
idea of how batshit insane some of these fuckers are. And obviously we'll move on to Oricon. So he before he was biotransferred, he was already an old decrepit old man, and he was really frail. And so they were like, you're not really useful to us at all in general. Like you're just a bookman. And so his model is like super frail. It's like a really skinny, really small, not very imposing guy. And in the lore, he can predict the future, which is why he's such a fucking pain in the ass. Um, and yeah, he has a long feud with Trazen the Infinite that lasts for several thousand years. And they started interfering with loads of very important shit. And then the Pharaons, which are like the big overlord boys of the Necrons, they basically yoinked Oricon and Trazen, put them on trial, and they were like, will you kids fucking stop, please? And so they punished them the best way.
He started it.
Yeah.
He started.
Yeah, that is what happened. They were arguing in the court, and they were like, all right, your punishment is that you've got to work together for the next 1,000 years. And we're going to send you to deal with some of this shit, like literally what a parent would do to a child. You and your brother, you're going to do the washing up together. That was literally it. So they continue to fuck with one another for about 1,000 years. Oricon teleported into Trazen's big gallery and just started turning off the stasis field. So all of these fucking Katachan infantry squads were like, oh fuck, we're somewhere. Quick, let's kill these weird alien things that are coming to life, and all hell ensued. Also, Oricon has these wacky ass orb things, where when the stars align, he basically goes Super Saiyan for some reason. I believe that's his thing, right? On the tabletop, I think it's every turn. He's kind of like a Death Strike, but he actually does things. Every turn you roll a dice, and if you get above a certain number or below a certain number, then he goes Super Saiyan, and his stats go from decrepit old man to I am a walking god. So he does have play on the tabletop, but it's very lottery driven.
Right.
The third crazy motherfucker old man, who is my favorite. Like Trazen and Oricon, if you haven't read the book, The Infinite and the Divine, I highly recommend it because it's like literally just two old guys fucking with each other for the entire book. But the third one is the most interesting one, and it's Nemesis Zandrek and his little buddy, his bodyguard Vargard Oberon. He has dementia. Literal like Necron dementia.
Literal robot dementia.
Yeah, he woke up when the machine code like got a little bit fucky, and so he still thinks he's flesh and blood. So he's regularly seen, like he'll capture people, like he captured a bunch of people after a battle, and he was like, "Oh, you are honorable warriors. We'll have a banquet in your name, and I'll keep you as prisoners of war." And so he's just sat there at the table, like shoving food and drink into his Necron fucking mouth speaker. And he's like, "Ah, yes." And Vargard Oberon is like his bodyguard, but also like his carer, his stay-at-home carer, who's got to like keep him on the straight and narrow. And he just looks at Zandrek and he's like, "What?
Really?
What is happening?
Really?
Why am I in this position?" But the advantage is he's a fucking awesome general, an incredible general, and I think that's kind of why they tolerate this clearly mentally unstable old Necron dude, because he's kind of like the Castellan Creed of Necron generals, so he's real good at fighting battles. And on the tabletop, there's a nice homage to Vargard Oberon and Zandrek, where whenever Nemesis Zandrek gets in a spot of bother, because he's fooling around, Vargard Oberon can teleport to him on the tabletop and act as his bodyguard, no matter where he is on the table, which is real cool. It's a nice little link to the
lore.
Yeah, it's cool. And I think they're part of the main dynasty of Necrons. What is it? What's the
Mefrit? No.
Is it Sautek? I think it's Sautek.
Sautek
Part
dynasty.
of the, I think he's exclusive to the Sautek dynasty. So if you do want to field him, you have to play Sautek. Moving on to the angriest of the oldest men, we have the Silent King. His model is fucking cool. It is huge.
It's amazing.
It has the largest data sheet in the game, I think.
Ever.
I think is there a contender that's even close? I don't think there is.
No.
No. So he's not only a gigantic model, but he also has 2 extra models flanking his main model, just because of reasons. He's less of a beat stick or a gun platform, although he is, and more of an army multiplier. So if you're playing like Silvertide Necrons, which is just like a buttload of Necron warriors, a ton of Immortals, lots of that sort of core Necron troop, he will take your army and sort of dial it up to 11. Just handing out buffs left, right, and center. He has a fight last aura. He has reroll 1s to hit in melee and shooting. And he has like something preposterous like 29 wounds total, all with a 4-up invuln. So he can't.
He's basically like Gulliman.
Yes.
A gun platform Gulliman.
Yeah. It's like Gulliman, but he's on a floating throne. With 2 gigantic shield generators and 2 bodyguards all on one base. That's basically what he is. And he's got an enslaved Katan on the top of his throne, just because. Look at these sick
why not?
Yeah. So he's got some mad vehicle shooting. He's got some decent melee, and sort of quite thematically, as you wound him, his pharaons die off and his data sheet gets shortened, so he sort of loses some of his abilities until he's finally dead. But he does take a while to kill because he's quite a ball ache to kill in general. But really, really good if you're running tons of sort of core Necron infantry. That's all the characters. I don't know if you have any. Do you have any random tidbits of lore to add for any of those guys, or did I cover pretty much most of it?
No, I think you've covered pretty much there and thereabouts.
If anyone gets bored,
I've got a couple of little tidbits. When it comes to the individual units themselves.
If anyone gets bored and they just like feel like browsing some Warhammer wikis, feel free to look up some of the Necron name characters, because there's like an absolute boundless resource of just hilarious stories and background on these guys. They're really, really.
I was going to say, honestly, like I could have done 3 hours.
Yeah,
kind of try to nip it in the bud because time constraints and stuff.
Yeah, there is tons to cover.
You're very fleshed out.
Yes, yeah. Onto sort of your generic core characters. You've got Chronomancers. So these, I don't believe they were always called Chronomancers, were they?
No.
They were just like cryptex. They had loads of different cryptex, but now they've got individual names. So you've got like Chronomancers,
individual names,
that kind of thing. So your Chronomancer is your troop support guy. I ran quite a few of them in my list, mainly because they give a single troop unit at the start of every turn a 5-up invuln, which is really handy if you're playing a lot of high AP ranged volume of ranged fire. So like Space Marines first turn and second turn, when they're firing hundreds of thousands of bolter shots at you, it will take you to your 6-up save, but he gives you a higher chance of surviving things. Not Flamestorm aggressors though, as we discovered. His staff is a las cannon for some reason, and they have a ton of customization options with those fancy little extra point costing like mini relics that they can get. And one of them, the most memes relic out of them all, is he can literally teleport a entire squad of something, anything, anywhere onto the battlefield, and teleport them out of combat and basically ass blast one thing off the table. So he can teleport himself in a huge Necron squad with Gauss blasters. He can teleport himself in a huge Lochus heavy destroyer squad, and just sort of wipe something off the table, or quickly yoink an objective. Or if you're stuck in melee, he can sort of teleport them out, and they don't classify as falling back. So there's a lot of high level play with these guys as your support headquarters, and you'll see them pretty much in every list. So it's worth getting your hands on one or two, and you can build them pretty much however you like. They've got a lot of neat little things like the countermeasure mines, the temporal countermeasure mines, where it minuses, does it halve advanced charges? I think it's half.
Yeah,
it's just a lot of fuckery, which the
it's a bit like the
Necrons,
Custodes thing, isn't it?
yeah, Tanglefoot. It's tomfoolery, which is what they seem to be really good at in both lore and on the tabletop. And then the core of any Necron army is the Necron warriors, who are, they're pretty good at a lot of things. Not great at
Necron
melee.
Warriors.
They don't die, and when they do, they don't. They have quite a few loadouts. They've got the 0 AP potential exploding shots Tesla guns. They've got the Gauss flares, which are sort of your mid-range sort of marine bolter equivalents, and then they've got the Gauss Reaper shotguns, which is currently what a lot of people are running. Very short range, but really high strength, high AP, decent damage. And I think in our game when we played them, they pretty much obliterated whatever they shot at, unless it was something stupidly durable that was being protected by stratagems. And they're the only unit in the army that can reroll ones for reanimation. So you'll see people running quite a lot of these units. They're really the core part of the army, and their new models do look pretty damn cool as well. I'm really impressed with how they
certainly do. Yeah.
At least
Especially
they don't have those stupid Lego lightsaber plastic things anymore.
No, and I like the little nods. The fact that the reanimation program be 100%. So
yeah,
you know, some of the necrodermis, which is the living metal skin, hasn't formed correctly or is just missing in places. Yeah, they're definitely 10 out of 10 when they did the rehash of the Warriors.
Yeah. Next up, we have another troop. It's not a troop unit. It's a fast attack, but it's pretty much treated as a troop unit for most players. And that's the humble Scarab Swarm, which, if you look at its data sheet, you just kind of look at it and you're like, meh. But they're fast as hell. If you're playing as Eternal Conquerors, they have objectives secured. And you can take them in enormous blobs of up to 8 or 10. And they have 4 wounds each, so they can be killed easily, but it's a lot of wounds for your opponent to chew through. So they have to dedicate a substantial amount of firepower to get rid of them. And
they have a naughty little strap which they can explode and deal mortal wounds.
Mortal wounds, yeah, which is very D3 mortal wounds in combat. Yeah, it's they're a real nuisance. They can fly across the board and quickly nab an objective. They can like get something stuck in melee, so you can stop someone's transport from getting anywhere. That kind of thing. They're a real pain in the ass, and they definitely sort of keep the army competitive. I think it's a humble unit that really does a lot of work. Next
I like
up,
the little.
Oh yeah, carry on.
Oh, sorry. No, go on.
The little. What did you like? What did you say? You like the little?
I like the little homage in here. So, silver beetle-like constructs, scarabs move ahead of the main army, flying in so thick that they blot out the sun. Scarabs appear without warning, silent but for the rustle of the carapace on carapace, a moving carpet of death, more deadly than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. If you played them in Novok Dynasty, they would actually do decent stuff in melee, I think, because they get that AP. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Next up, we've got the big boys. Moving on to the thick daddies. And speaking of the most dummy thick of boys is the Lochus Destroyers, which are the renamed destroyers. They used to just be called basic bitch destroyers. Now they're called Lochus Destroyers. They've got normal ones, heavy destroyers, all sorts of bits. And they're basically a flying, moving weapons platform. Got a ton of weapon loadout options. They've got some anti-infantry, anti-elite infantry, and anti-vehicle stuff. and they're very competitive units. You'll see these guys in quite a lot of competitive list armies, because they're just very like a Swiss Army knife. They've got a strength 10 version, they've got a strength 7 version, they got blast, multiple stuff, they've got reanimation protocols, they've got living metal, so they regen wounds as well. They get to natively reroll hit rolls of 1, and obviously they don't have the penalty to move and fire heavy weapons, so they're a real well-rounded weapons platform. Next up is the carry on.
Go on. I was just going to quickly say, Nathan, from a model point of view, the Destroyers are A, easy to build.
Yeah.
And B, they don't have swap out weapons for the weapon profiles, do they? So from a gaming and a modeling perspective, it's an easy build kit.
Yeah.
With one weapon that has multiple profiles.
Oh no, I don't think it's one weapon. I do think they have different weapons.
Do they? All right, my bad.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ones. They're not too different. They're very easy to model around, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
So yeah. There's also the melee destroyers, the Scorpec destroyers, and the nice thing about the destroyer kits in general is they have a lot of stratagem support. Tons of stratagem support. So there's a lot of tricksy bits that you can do with them on the tabletop. And they're all valid options for both tabletop and competitive play, which is quite nice. Next up, we got a bit of an iconic unit, which is the Doomsday Ark, which can also be repurposed as a troop transport, although I think most people just used it as the Doomsday Ark. This is what me and Dan were talking about when we said the main sort of Doomsday Ark and Doom Scythe lists, where people would bring an absolute ton of just Doom cannons, they're called, something ridiculous like that. They come as anti-tank and transport models, which I've already mentioned, and they also have anti-infantry secondary armaments. They're the Tesla, I think they're the Tesla carbines, where they explode on 6s. So if you charge one of these with some infantry, you might have a bad day. But they're very durable, and they are quite effective at one-shotting vehicles without an invul, because they've just such high strength and such high damage heavy weapons. Really nice models as well, and they're huge, absolutely huge. And then onto the Venerable Night Scythe, which is very similar in that it's got the same gun, but this one's flying, and this is what Dan mentioned when he said the flying croissant, because it literally is a flying croissant with a Doom cannon strapped to the bottom and some big Tesla guns. Really cool model. Even though it looks ridiculous, it is cool at the same time. It's very unique. Like, you would know someone's playing Necrons across the room just by seeing one of these models. I think
it's probably my favorite in their range still.
I think it's probably one of, if not the most iconic Necron model in the range. It's just really cool. It moves fast. It has a really great tabletop presence. It can just do a lot of things. Oh, and it can drop troops. If you put any troops in Deep Strike, it has a weird rule where it can interdimensional corridor, whatever it's called.
That's only for the Night Sight, I believe.
Yeah, the transport version. Yeah, you can just drop troops as if it were like a Valkyrie, that kind of thing. So, and then finally, which we mentioned earlier, I'll talk about the Katan Shards. So you got the Nightbringer, who is the melee powerhouse who makes Custodies cry because he turns off invuln saves. Does mortal wounds. You got the Deceiver, who is more of a spellcaster kind of guy, but they can all cast spells that do shitloads of mortal wounds. They are mortal wound engines. And you've got the Void Dragon, who's pretty much the anti-vehicle Katan. He's got a souped up anti-vehicle spear that shoots, and a souped up anti-vehicle melee. They all have powers which do just tons of mortal wounds, and they all have a rule, the Necrodermis rule, which means they can only take 4 wounds per phase.
3 wounds.
3 wounds.
I think it's 3, isn't it?
Something like that. Basically, you can't one-shot, which makes them a real ball ache to deal with if you're playing armies that are only good at one thing. So if you're playing like Imperial Guard, you're only going to do 3 wounds a turn because you're very unlikely to get into melee with them and do damage. Same with Tau. If you're playing someone like White Scars, it's very unlikely you're going to do much beyond shooting and not much shooting, to be honest, mainly melee. So you really need to have an army that has both shooting, psychic, and melee to really deal with these sorts of things. They're like these missiles. Yeah, they're these missiles that you put in your army. They're quite expensive, but you throw them at a corner of the board, and 2 turns later, that corner of the board is pretty much dead. They're cool as fuck. I mean, the model for the Void Dragon is huge and it looks amazing. It's probably a ball ache to paint, but if you can paint it well, it's gonna draw a lot of eyes. The Deceiver is middle ground. He's a cool model, sort of not too difficult to paint. The only downside is, unfortunately, the Nightbringer, who's ideal for killing any army with inborns like Harlequins or Custodes or Death Guard. His model is terrible. It's really terrible. Yeah. It's tiny. It's like the size of 2 paint pots stacked on top of each other. And it's a real pain to build because he's got really spindly little arms. So Beast in Melee, probably one of the models I would recommend people make out of something else, probably specifically for the Nightbringer. He's just a bit of a nuisance.
Yeah.
But overall, really good. Great rules as well. Are there any other models from the sort of core Necron range that sort of need to get a little shout out?
You know, people still use Immortals.
Oh yes, so the Immortals are the big boy. They're basically Necron warriors, but thick. They've got lots of armor, extra wounds, so they're 2 wounds a pop, but it's functionally similar. And they basically just have heavy versions of what the Necron warriors have equipped. So the heavy Gauss flares and the heavy Tesla carbines, as they're called, I think.
Yes. And the kits can be repurposed as
Death Marks.
Death Marks.
Yeah. So the Immortal kit also makes Death Marks, which are they're
snipers.
They're kind of like, they're snipers, but they're like they're more like scouts. Less less like in Eliminators, who are sort of, their sole purpose is sniping characters and they do it well. Death Marks are more of a utility sniper because they can deep strike the same turn an enemy unit deep strikes, and they can shoot when the enemy unit deep strikes as well. Sort of like an Auspex scan, but they can shoot from like 36 inches away or whatever the range of their rifle is. So if your opponent deep strikes a unit that's not that tough or durable, not like a Terminator squad or something, but you can quickly drop in your squad of 5 or 10 Death Marks during their turn, outside of the standard 9 inches, and make a shooting attack against them. So they're a bit memey in that way, especially if someone's using a weakish model to float around the board. But I don't really see them use that often because their weapon profiles are a bit meh.
Tomb Spiders, though, I think they're a unit of note.
Which one's the Tomb Spider?
Tomb Spiders are the guy.
The big spiders, no?
The big spiders, the ones that reanimate.
The Canoptic Spiders.
Canoptic.
Yeah. They used to be called Tomb Spiders. They're now called Canoptic Spiders. GW decided to rename the entire range to fit certain. They have like cults, don't they? They have the Destroyer cult, which is your Lochus. You've got the the Canoptic guys and all sorts. Yeah, so the Tomb Spiders, or the Canoptic Spiders as they're now called, they basically follow around Canoptic units. Not just the Scarab Swarms, who are also Canoptic type, but all sorts of weird spindly floaty boys like the Tomb Blades and Wraiths and stuff like that. I believe they're all Canoptic Wraiths. And they basically heal those or bring them back to life. They can resurrect D3 units every turn, I think, and heal stuff with their claws.
And they turn off.
They turn off what? Sorry.
They're your anti-psyker units, aren't they?
Yeah, they don't turn it off, but they give your army a deny. They give you
sorry,
a
yes.
unit that you can deny the witch once per turn with each of your guys, provided they're equipped with the Gloom Prism. And they can also repair vehicles, but you have to equip them with the various bits and bobs to make them do those things. So they're quite cool models. They're relatively easy to build and paint. They're quite... they've received new models, I believe, since the old ones. The old ones were a little bit...
Yes.
A little bit plain. Similar to the old Eldar bikes. Very plain, not much detail to them. But yeah, they're nice. I enjoyed building and painting them. A lot of character to them. That brings us to sample lists. So the first sample list is the list that I play. When I play Necrons, I just want to bring a shitload of troops and be a nuisance to people, because that's Necrons in a nutshell. So my list is basically a fuck ton of Scarabs and Necron warriors and some basically supporting units. So 3 Chronomancers, because they give your Necron warrior troops the 5-up invuln, and they each have their own little fancy what do you call them? They're like relics, but they're not. So Veil of Darkness to teleport a squad out of combat or into your opponent's backlines. Hypermaterial Ablator, which I think gives your 1 squad cover, +1 to their armor save, and Counter Temporal Nenomines, which is the pick 1 unit and halve their advance and charge. 1 Technomancer who can enact D3 Resurrection Protocols at the start of the game. So it's your your other way of getting Necrons back that didn't reanimate. And he's got a fancy staff that's quite good in melee. It's called the Voltaic Staff. It's a relic staff that's an assault profile. I think it's 6-2/2, and it's not too bad in melee either. So he has a nice rounded profile, and he's got an invuln save as well. In the Force Organization slot, it also has 3 2-man squads of Crypto Thralls. And because this list runs so many HQ support units, you tend to run a lot of Crypto Thralls because they have the bodyguard rule, which means if anyone tries to shoot at your Chronomancers or your Technomancers or your Overlord, the Crypto Thralls take the wounds instead. And if your HQs get charged with Crypto Thralls nearby, the Crypto Thralls get a little buff in melee. So they get sort of supercharged, they get twice as many attacks in melee so that they can sort of fight on behalf of their HQ that they're protecting. Then
as you forgot, they have a pistol.
Oh yes, they have a fancy pistol that's actually not terrible. It's their eyeball. It's like a baleful eye or something like that. No, that's Yarrick, isn't it? It's like Yarrick's eyeball, but better. It actually does things. I think it's strength 5. Then you've got the ever-present Overlord. You always have one of these in there. And this list, he has the relic resurrection orb called the Orb of Eternity, which lets you reenact resurrection protocols for 1 squad completely. So even if they died 2 turns ago, you can try and resurrect the entire squad back again, as long as at least 1 model's still left on the board. And this one gives you +1 to your reanimation protocols. So everything's reanimating on 4s. He also has the Eternal Madness Warlord trait, which gives him +1 to wound in melee, which pretty much everyone gives the Overlord. And they usually give him either the War Scythe, which is a strength ×2 scythe, or they give him the Relic Scythe, which is similar but slightly buffed up. Just so he's a bit nasty in melee, he can probably bad touch some vehicles, that kind of thing. In the troop slot, you've got 3 squads of 20 bricks of warriors, which is sort of the core way that this army functions, all with Gauss Reapers, so those strength 5, AP -2, 1 damage weapons, so they're nothing to sneeze at. They do a lot of damage, and they hold your objectives. They get to pre-game move because you're running this list as Relentlessly Expansionist, which gives you a 6-inch pre-game move, and Eternal Conquerors, which gives everything, including Scarab Swarms, OBSEC, and if they already have OBSEC, it gives you double OBSEC. So you're very good at holding objectives, but not much else.
Double OBSEC's quite a rare trait, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah. The only kind of thing you see with anything close to that is Imperial or Chaos Knights with that counts as 10 or 15 models, whatever it is. In the elite slot, you've got 2 Canoptic Spiders, which James mentioned earlier, both equipped with Gloom Prisms to give the army a source of Deny the Witch. And their sole purpose is to stick with your Scarab Swarms to bring models back to life. They also throw in a random Canoptic Reanimator in this list to hang around one of your Necron warrior squads to give them +1 to their reanimation, so they're reanimating on 4s. And then it rounds off the list with 3 Scarab Swarms, 1 squad of 8 and 2 squads of 7. And these are your sort of scouts that quickly whip out turn 1 and grab objectives, or throughout the end of the game, if they're still alive, they can quickly nick objectives off your opponent because they are fast and they have OBSEC. That's the generalist Silvertide list. A lot of newer Necron lists run the Silent King somewhere within here to give that army the that sort of mass buffing support that really helps.
Yeah.
If I owned one, I would totally run him. Then
yeah,
we will have a quick look at one of the tournament lists that recently came second at a GT. And this is not too different, but this does showcase that there is some relevance in multiple detachments, but they still run the
validity.
They still run the same dynasty. So they still run Relentlessly Expansionist and Eternal Conquerors. So 6-inch pre-game move and OBSEC and double OBSEC. And then they run two detachments, a patrol detachment and a vanguard. So the patrol is and obviously your generic Overlord with the relic Scythe, which I mentioned before. The same Warlord trait, which is Eternal Madness for that +1 to wound. But then they go slightly different on this way. They have a Plasmancer who does mortal wounds to anything within so many inches of him. And they give this guy the Veil of Darkness so that he can teleport a unit wherever once a game. And then they have just 1 brick of Necron Warriors with the basic Gauss Flayers, not the Gauss Reapers, just the standard Gauss Flayers. And then they have a couple of Crypto Thralls in the elite slot to give your headquarters that bodyguard rule, just for a little bit of character protection. Then in the Vanguard detachment, which is where the meat of the list is, they're again running the same dynasty choices. But this time they're running the Scorpec Lord, who's the big spidery melee guy with lots of melee weapons and all sorts of stuff. They give him the Gauntlet of the Conflagrator relic, which just makes his fist a bit more fancy. And then they get a bit spicy and they bring a Shard of the Nightbringer because it's just devastating in melee. And then the elite slots are further filled out with the Canoptic Plasmacytes, 2 of those, and I'll get onto why those are important in a second. And that's because they bring 2 squads of 6 Scorpec Destroyers. So these are the Destroyer Court guys, but they're the melee versions. So these guys are basically being flanked by the Scorpec Lord, who's giving them the rerolls. And the Canoptic Plasmacytes basically are... So you know how you overcharge plasma? These guys are basically like little servitors that overcharge your destroyers. So they make them extra killy and melee, but there's slight chance that they'll take mortal wounds. So it's like overcharging plasma, but you're overcharging a melee squad instead. That's what the Plasmacytes do. So your big destroyer squads are just sort of melting anything that's in their path. And they move quite fast. I think they move a good like 10+ inches, the Scorpec Destroyers. And then they run 2 squads of 5 Lochus Destroyers with the Gauss Cannons, the 7 3d3 shots, strength 7, AP -1 or 2, sort of kill a lot of elite infantry. And that's the list. So it's a lot of huge melee bricks with a little bit of character support, basically. It's a completely different take on what a lot of popular lists take. But like I said, you'll see a lot of Lochus Destroyers in lists like this. But it's nice to see that such a wide variety of the codex is viable, because this list contains so much of it.
Which I kind of harkens back to my original point, which is the Necrons as an army in general quite utilitarian in the sense that if, like I say, from I suppose a friendly point of view, you can run a very heavy army, you can run a very fast army, you can run a very troops army.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice that so many things are potentially viable. Like we said,
Yes.
they are struggling a little bit in the competitive meta, but there's quite a few lists that are varying, that are doing well, and it's nice to see that people are finding new lists to function at the competitive level this long after their codex. Like people are actually exploring the codex for alternative options, and they're working.
Yeah.
Which is overall just quite nice to see. But
Which basically means there's not just one meta list in the codex.
yes,
There's, like you say, as the meta changes, the codex in itself can evolve.
yeah, pretty much. So yeah, that's all we got. That's all I got down. Is there anything
Dan.
else?
No, dude, I think you've covered everything.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to. Dan's been quiet for a while. I'm just curious to know what
I'm
his
listening.
thoughts
I'm
are now
taking
that
notes.
we've. No, I know you are, dude. Of course you are.
So what you're telling me is I can have a full melee army of really choppy robots.
Yeah, pretty much. I have quite a lot. I own quite a lot of Scorpic Destroyers. I have two Scorpic Lords, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, I've got 8 Scorpic Destroyers. And I have a load more on the way from my magazine as well. So I think I'll have 11.
You and me both.
Yeah, so we got Scorpic Destroyers for days. They're actually really good. I've been on the receiving end of Scorpic Destroyers a number of times, and they're very scary because they have so many weapon profiles. They're like a Swiss Army knife, and they look like Swiss Army knives too. They just kind of charge into melee, and it's like, I need to kill troops. I'll just use my troop killing weapons. Oh, I need to smash this tank in half. I'll just use this huge blade that will cut it in pieces. They're quite effective and fast and durable as well, and lots of stratagem support as well. But yeah, that's all I got. That's all I got. Hopefully the people listening feel enlightened about the lore and the gameplay and how to use reanimation protocols correctly, because by God, that's the biggest falling block of the entire army is, are you going to get reanimation protocols right? But they got cool models and they got cool rules, but they could probably use a codex update.
Oh, no, they got the codex. Stop.
I was going to say,
Give me an
don't
Eldar
upset Dan
codex.
when don't talk about codex updates when there's still those armies that still haven't had a codex.
I'm upset. Stop.
Yep.
But Dan, come on then. So, what do you think?
No, Necrons are pretty cool. And like you guys said, they got some fantastic lore, some great models. And who knows? Maybe I'll play them on the channel soon enough. We'll see.
Yeah, we've got enough models, I think, to make pretty much any army. I just need to get some variants painted up. Anyway, let me take us home. Let me run us out. If you would like to join our Discord community, you can find the link in the section below. It's also on this overlay. Discord.gg/. If only Discord allows.
What he said.
Properly.
Did you just stroke out?
That's a technical term for it.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I don't know why they don't let you take a name off after that /. I guess it's down to domain reasons or something. I don't know. It's one of those things. If you want to support us to help us carry on doing what we're doing, you can find us at patreon.com/lightning assault. Supporters of the channel get to join our podcast channel on the Discord so they can listen in live and sort of comment in the podcast channel, and you get a nice neat little warden name on our Discord server. If you would like to commission some fine paintings, well, not paintings of models, that is. I'm sure James will paint them for you if you want to.
Can you hook me up with some big titty Necron hentai?
Some tentacles, yeah. You can find James at fiverr.com/madmagospaints. You've been doing some spicy stuff recently.
I have, and on Instagram, the same, well, whatever, Mad Magos Paints.
Yeah, and you can check out the Meadery at lightningassaultmeadery.com, and it's the same on Facebook as well. Anyway, that is all we have time for today. I think we've overrun a little bit, but never mind, only by about 20 minutes. If you would like to join us again for another podcast, you can join us next week on Sunday at 7 p.m. And if you would like to catch up with us on our live battle reports, you can see us on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. I don't think we decided what we're playing next week, but I know the week after we're playing Tau and Imperial Guard. Looking forward to getting some Tau on the channel and our friend Andy. But yeah, that's it. Thank you everybody for watching and listening if you're on Spotify. And we will see you guys next Sunday or next Thursday.
Peace out. Keep the lights on.
Like and subscribe, etc. Bit late.
Like and subscribe. I'll keep the lights on. Yeah.
Thank you.